Hey, Jack.
Hey, Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Hey, Jack, Leadership Reflections with Jack Nehlig. And today, Jack, I want to talk about the concept of accountability in leadership. Anything you can share with us on that?
Well, yeah, of course I can. And accountability um, is one of those leadership traits or standards that is an absolute. It's one that you would say, ask people about, and they, name one thing that leadership should do, and it is being accountable, right? And normally, what they focus on when they focus on accountability or being accountable is this part, right? It's the money, the results, the numerical results, right? So, in a way, it's one of those ones people just sort of say and then step back, right? It's like this ominous thing, the accountability thing. You could get hired, you get fired over this one, right? You know? So it's this, I like to think of accountability as the loneliest part of leadership, right?
Makes sense.
It's one where you got to stand by yourself, let all the people look at you because it's the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
It's the old buck stops here thing from, I think, Truman or somebody. So accountability is this lonely, very serious topic. And it's pretty simple. It's not very complex, right? But I first want to definitional a little bit this one, and people get a little confused or debate responsibility versus accountability. And I like to keep those two separate, and the best way to define them or compare them is responsibility is you are directly, the word directly, responsible for doing something. So production line people putting parts in assemblies, putting things together, they're responsible for their operation. The leadership part above that is the accountable part. They're accountable for all of the little responsibilities to happen at the same time, right? So it's almost an org chart thing. And that's why responsibility isn't the leadership word as much as accountability is the leadership word. And the higher up you get, the less you're directly responsible for. You can't even share your expertise anymore because you're so far removed. But your accountability quotient goes up and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's responsibility versus accountability. And then the way to just summarize it in your mind, meeting your commitments is the way to remember accountability, right? So start off to this episode today, and this will be a quick one because as I said, it's a lonely, simple concept, so we don't have tons to say about this today. But I want to give you a story about my dad. And it was my first real lesson in accountability. So my mom was a teacher, and my dad had a little business. Like 3 people that worked for him. It was a silkscreen printing business. And my mom and dad did an awesome job of raising kids and, just keeping our family together. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had enough. Everything was fine. I headed off to college because they provided for that. And then I started my career. And on one of my vacations homes after my career, while my dad still has a little company going, and I was working for Honeywell, I had some graphs and charts with me. I don't remember if I was on my first leadership job or whether I was just looking at graphs and charts of what's going on in the company. And my dad looked over my shoulder and he said, "Well, what's that chart?" And I said, "Well, that's the on-time delivery chart of our division." And I said, "Dad, we've got a goal of 98%, and as you can see here, we're up to 95. We're making great progress, but we got to get to 98%." And I gave him this great speech about how important it was to have a KPI, and our company was working to 98% on-time delivery. And he just looked at me in a quiet moment and he said, "Why would you ever plan to miss a delivery?" to your customers. And I said, that's a good point, Dad. He goes, I don't get it. And as he walked away, I thought about it. And I thought about my dad working nights and weekends when he had to. And the reason he had to was he had made a commitment to some customer that he would deliver something on that Monday or that Tuesday. And he just did what it took to make it happen.
Got it done.
And so that was my first lesson in accountability. Yeah, that's the gold standard. You, Trevor, as a great entrepreneur of industry stage media, entrepreneurs feel accountability more than a manager in a 10,000 person company that they're the director of this or that in the middle, right? They're taught by charts and graphs that we all don't have to be perfect. We don't have to work our butt off, just make sure you do this part and everything's fine. So I always admire the entrepreneurs, the startups, the small companies, because they take accountability to heart really deeply.
Yeah.
And that's this lesson I learned from my dad. So even though I couldn't get 100% on-time delivery in the function I was leading at Honeywell, I could think about daily or weekly or monthly 100% on-time deliveries and build on those every day and get better and better and better. And it was just the right attitude on accountability to me, that lesson I learned from my dad. So remember that you're accountable not just for your operation, but you're accountable as a leader for all the goals and the mission of the unit or the company you work in, right? It's not just your stuff. Can you help others, make their goals? So that's another part of it. It's bigger than just you. And I would also reflect on sort of like, this is almost like a Star Wars thing. Accountability is a force. And it tends to bring out the best in leaders, but it also tends to bring out the worst in leaders, right? When they're staring at a deadline and it ain't going to happen, there's some tough integrity moments coming.
Yeah.
And there's also a lack of creativity versus creativity moment where they just give up. And they don't bring in their team to try to come up with a better answer to what's going on. So accountability is a true test of a leader and what they're made of when things go bad. When things are going good, you can find any leader that's going to tell you how great they are on accountability. Look at my stuff. I'm really fantastic. We're the best. But accountability gets tested when things are going bad. And my favorite news story on that is when COVID happened and we at Phoenix Contact and everybody had to go through that whole thing as a company. We all had to go through it as an individual in our lives, but as a company, you had to go through a lot of crazy stuff. First, proving you were an essential company that could keep working and not be sent home, right? Which we did. But my best accountability moment that I like to reflect on that me and my leadership team did, it wasn't just me, it's we did this together, was there were great financial pressures going on at the time. Your sales were dropping, nobody could take deliveries, and so your profits weren't looking good, and every company was looking at ways to save money. And many of the government programs didn't fit us and we couldn't use. And one day I was struggling with this and understanding that we were fighting financial challenges, and of course wanted to avoid all the worst things there. And I thought about how the government had created this little $600 a week thing for people that got laid off. And I was saying, well, I'm not laying people off because that's the worst thing. We're going to need them in the next year and the next year when this all comes springing back, right? So I don't want to lay anybody off. Even though if I did lay some people off in the factory or the warehouse that didn't have a lot of work, they'd have done fine because the $600 a week on top of the benefit which was from Pennsylvania, was like 300. They get 900. They were actually getting a little pay raise if I laid them all off. But if I laid them all off, then I didn't have any way to get the product out. It was we were kind of stuck. And if I only laid a few of them off, it doesn't save us a lot of money, and we needed bigger money. We needed to really save some money. So I kept thinking about this thing, and I came up with a concept and ran it by one or two of my other leaders, and we went back and forth, and we settled on a crazy story, which was they had removed the 1 week waiting period to get unemployment benefits. You used to have a 1 week waiting period. You get laid off, you have to wait a week, and then you can get money. But they removed that during COVID. So you get laid off on a Friday, Monday you can start collecting right away. And I thought about this, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. And then I said, what if we laid people off, but then there's a problem with laying people off, and that was, even with the $600 benefit, the factory and warehouse workers, it fit their financial level of life. It was fine for them. But our biggest cost problem was everybody else. It wasn't them. We had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of more people, like, you know, from an accountant to a marketeer to me, that were making more money than those people. And there was a lot more of us. So that's where our problem was. We needed to lay off those people. But then they're making more money than the $600 a week plus the $300 a week, which turns out to be about $45,000 a year was the break-even point. Anybody making less than $45,000 a year, they were fine in the programs. Anybody making more, they got stopped at $45,000. So if you were making $80,000 or $90,000 or whatever, you got a problem if you got laid off. So we came up with this concept that we would lay everybody off, and then the company would make up the difference of what they weren't getting compensated for when we rehired them as a signing bonus. So anyway, the math went like this. We laid everybody off over a 10-week period, but we did it in 5 2-week pay periods. So 1/5 of our employees every 2 weeks got laid off. And then the Monday after your 2-week layoff, we gave you a signing bonus to make up anything greater than $45,000 that you lost, so that the employee was made whole. So they got a paid vacation for 2 weeks in the middle of COVID, which then the government paid for.
Yeah.
Part of it. And the long story goes, that saved us $1.8 million in 3 months. So we turned the lemons into lemonade. We were accountable. We had to find ways to save not hundreds of thousands of dollars. We had to save ways to save $1 million or $2 million. And we did it. But we took care of the employees along the way. So that was a great example of how during the tough times you can be accountable and still achieve great things. And you don't have to let the dark side of accountability get you and take the easy way out, right?
Yeah, I think during that time as well, I remember going through that process. And as an employee at the time, it felt reassuring to know that the leadership team and the leaders were actually working on a solution. Because at that time, I had many friends across the industry where they were just getting laid off. And I think that's an isolated scenario, but as a leader, it becomes pretty easy just to mail it in and say, we're just going to lay off these individuals, and they're not going to blame us. They're going to blame this whole nationwide, worldwide thing that's going on. You guys took the opposite. You said, hey, we have this accountability to our team and our employees, and we also now have to get creative. We got to, in a time of adversity, it's not easy, but when you buy into that accountability and you're like, well, this is what we're doing, now you're opening up the mind share to get creative because you know you're going to make this thing work.
And we did it all for one and one for all.
Yeah.
We didn't selectively say you people are hurt and you people are fine. It was a one for all and all for one. And I got laid off for 2 weeks too.
I remember.
Everybody got laid off for 2 weeks. So anyway, it was a great story to remind me. I used to remind myself after that day that you need to always dig deep in creativity when you're facing bad times. You need to double down. So anyway, that's a story to end accountability. Accountability is a quick one. I have an image to maybe leave us with. And I want leaders to think about a picture, right? So when times are good, you have lots of celebrations, right? And, you know, this quarter we did this, and this month we did that, or we achieved this sales number, or we reached this milestone, and we like to take pictures, right? Everybody takes a picture, and then you post it on LinkedIn or whatever. Well, we don't do that when we have bad times, right? We do it when they're having good times. But let's think of two pictures. And the first picture is when the good times are happening, and the second picture is when the bad times are happening. What I want leaders to think about is when the good times are happening, you're taking that good times picture, I want the leaders to stand in the back. And when you have the bad time picture, I want the leader to stand in the front, right in the middle. Very prominent.
It's a powerful visual.
Right? That's accountability.
Yeah.
When things are going great, it's because your team did it. When things are going bad, you're accountable for that. It's your problem. And I think that's the image we should just leave it with today.
Yeah, and that's what makes a great leader.
Yep.
So great insights, Jack. That was another great episode. So I appreciate you sharing that as always, as do our listeners. And anything else to add, or is that all for today?
I think that'll do it. We
Perfect.
finally did a quick one.
We did it. All right, we'll be back on the next episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks everybody. Take care. Go lead.
All right, see you guys.